So I rewatched the live-action Beauty and the Beast remake the other day as an act of self-loathing, and in case you were wondering, yes, it is still a piece of hot garbage. I am well aware of the fact that this isn't news, but there's this one scene that I forgot about, and remembering that it exists made my blood boil.
You know Shakespeare?
I had an expensive education.
Actually, Romeo and Juliet's my favourite play.
Why is that not a surprise?
I'm sorry?
Well, all that heartache and pining and so many better things to read.
What did he say?
This scene makes me angry for a number of reasons, but I want to focus on the Beast's poor summation of Romeo and Juliet and defend the play a bit because the narrative surrounding this work is fundamentally broken. Odds are you didn't make it out of high school without having to read Romeo and Juliet at least once. It's one of Shakespeare's most well-known and popular plays, behind only the tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. Romeo and Juliet is a cornerstone of pop culture. It's been made into countless movies, it's referenced in dozens of pop songs, and it's got meme material for days. So why is it that no one talks about the actual intended theme of the play? We all know the story by hand. Hell, its premise of forbidden love has sparked many a fanfic within the past 2 decades. The problem is that this is the only aspect of the show that society has hyperfixated on. Everyone likes to debate the validity of Romeo and Juliet's love with questions like, how can you fall in love with someone over the span of 4 days? Was it just lust motivating these kids? Does love at first sight even exist? I'm gonna take a wild guess and presume that your subconscious has already answered these questions. We all have our preconceived notions about this story, and that is not a bad thing. But I'm gonna let you all in on a little secret that I hope will help change your perspective about this play. It does not matter if they actually loved each other or not. It never has, and it never will. Romeo and Juliet is not a romantic story with a tragic ending. It is a tragedy that uses romance to prove a point. And forgive my condescension, but that point is literally spelled out for us in the first lines of the script. The full prologue roughly translates to this. Hello! This play is set in Verona. It's pretty here. You know what isn't pretty? This weird-ass blood feud between 2 rich families that's been going on for so long that no one even knows how it started. Innocents caught in the crossfire include women, children, and cabbages.
Oh, my cabbages!
What we're about to show you is how a pair of doomed star-crossed lovers brought this feud to an end. Their deaths, though tragic, were the only way this feud would ever come to an end in the first place. Enjoy. Or don't. I can't tell you what to do. There you have it. You can debate the love versus lust argument all you want, but at the end of the day, it's the innocence of Romeo and Juliet's mutual affection that serves as a wake-up call for the remaining Montagues and Capulets. These families have done nothing but pass down blind, irrational hatred from generation to generation, and that hatred comes at a cost. It's an important message, it's a timeless message, and it's a devastatingly relevant message in this the year of our Lord 2021. But it's not the universal takeaway readers have. Why is that? Well, as a burnt-out former gifted kid, I'm inclined to blame the American education system because it's just really easy to blame them for a lot of things currently wrong with society. Romeo and Juliet tends to get taught to 9th graders. And speaking as someone who was once a 9th grader herself, 9th graders have absolutely no desire to authentically engage with anything. Not with themselves, not with their peers, and definitely not with an emotion-driven play written 4 centuries ago in a syntax that is completely foreign to them. My point is, information is going to get lost in translation when you don't care about what's being taught. Speaking of translation, let's not discount the fact that Shakespeare's works are hard to understand. It's off-putting to read something so difficult while simultaneously worrying about how your comprehension of the material, or lack thereof, will affect your grade. Here's where one of my potentially controversial opinions comes into play. Shakespeare isn't meant to be read, it is meant to be watched. Your brain will follow along better with the confusing words when it has images to associate with them. When you have trained actors infusing their lines with life through their intonations and mannerisms. For example, I'd never read Twelfth Night when we went on a field trip in 8th grade to see a performance of it, but I was still able to keep up with the plot, laugh at most of the jokes, and get traumatized by an old man wearing a pair of yellow tights because the troupe knew what they were doing. I know that there are people out there who will claim that you need to read a play for yourself so that you can form your own opinion of it, but I'd argue that in order to have an informed opinion in the first place, you need to be exposed to multiple different perspectives and interpretations on a work. If you want to argue that Romeo and Juliet were only lusting after each other, fine, go ahead. But only if you can back up your claim using real evidence and not just your insistence that falling in love at first sight isn't quote-unquote believable. In fact, I don't think Shakespeare expected audiences to find it believable. Keep in mind, this play was written nearly 5 centuries ago. Audiences in 16th century England would have found the idea of marrying for love hysterical because back then, marriage was, and in some ways still kind of is, a business transaction. Why else have the character of Paris in the play if not to remind us of this? And can I just say, critiquing a work of fiction for not being believable enough 5 centuries removed from its initial publication date feels like a really shallow and disingenuous engagement with the text. There's a reason why the saying fact is crazier than fiction exists. More often than not, it's true, and fiction should be allowed to push the boundaries of realistic believability. That's why fiction exists. I think this is part of the reason why West Side Story escapes some of the same criticisms that Romeo and Juliet receives, despite it being a fairly straightforward retelling of the story. Excellent music and dancing aside, it's much easier for people to grasp the gravity of the violence happening on stage because it's set against the backdrop of New York. We know New York, or at the very least, we think we know New York. So warring gangs speaks to audiences in a more direct fashion than rich Italians biting their thumbs at each other ever could. It's also worth noting that the Juliet character doesn't die at the end of this adaptation. She gets this kick-ass monologue instead.
How do you fire this gun, Chino? Just by pulling this little trigger? How many bullets are left, Chino? Enough for you? And you? All of you! You all killed him! And my brother! And Riff! Not with bullets and guns. With hate! Well, I can kill too. Because now I have hate! How many can I kill, Chino? How many? And still have 1 bullet left for me. Oh, no.
The tragedy arguably hits harder here because we're not just supposed to mourn the loss of Romeo and Juliet's lives, we're supposed to mourn the loss of their potential. Violence has robbed them of their futures. In Shakespeare's version, they die together as innocents who have been warped by a conflict not their own. Through death, these characters are essentially rejecting the world that forbids them from being together. In West Side Story, Maria lives, but her innocence is slain when Tony takes his last breath. The world has rejected her, yet she still has to live in it. The original version of this video was uploaded before the West Side Story remake came out, and it would be remiss of me not to talk a little bit about it here. The 2021 film is a good case study in how minor adaptational changes can detract from the overarching narrative. I Feel Pretty Playing After the Rumble may be more accurate to the 1957 Broadway play, but the tonal whiplash I experienced during my first watch-through damn near broke my neck. One of the most important and necessary differences between these films is the fact that Steven Spielberg cast Puerto Rican actors to play the Puerto Rican characters. I didn't think anyone could rival Rita Moreno's portrayal of Anita, but Ariana DeBose knocked it out of the park.
You murdered your love, he murdered mine!
In my opinion, West Side Story 2021 has a crippling fundamental flaw, and it's the male lead. Richard Beymer's Tony is a useless himbo. Ansel Elgort's Tony is a borderline psychopath. When I left the theater, I didn't mourn the lost potential of this relationship. I thought to myself, whew, Maria sure dodged a bullet. Having an unsympathetic Romeo is actually a really interesting angle to approach the story from, one that can easily be supported by Shakespeare's text. His obsession with Rosalind reveals a level of emotional immaturity, and the age gap between him and Juliet is a deeply alarming aspect of the source material. Tybalt is rarely portrayed as sympathetic, but David Alvarez's Bernardo is the character you find yourself rooting for as the story plays out. This drastically shifts the lens of perspective on the tragic elements of West Side Story. In the 1961 version, a cycle of hate and violence destroys a burgeoning romance between 2 optimistic youths. In the 2021 version, the cynical adults are proven right, and the idealistic kids get everyone killed. One of my high school English teachers once said something really smart that I wholeheartedly agreed with, and I didn't write it down. It was something along the lines of, a good tragedy should be the ice pick to the frozen heart of the human condition. The best tragedies demonstrate the power of what could have been, and Romeo and Juliet is one of those tragedies. It's easy to laugh at the fact that they only knew each other for 4 days, but on the other hand, they only knew each other for 4 days. And that really sucks. Who cares if they barely knew each other or that they might have been an ill-suited couple in the long run? It's not like divorce would have been a plausible or realistic option for them. And on the topic of realism, in case you haven't noticed, reality sucks. Why do you want fiction to reflect the hellscape we currently live in? I know that it's easy to mock displays of raw emotionality, to scoff at the idea of love at first sight. But don't direct this cynicism towards works of fiction that honestly don't deserve to be analyzed under this lens. Being a cynic doesn't make you inherently better than the people who are willing to let magic into their lives. In fact, you're really just hindering yourself by cutting off avenues to other potential experiences. And I know the real beast would agree with me.
For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo.
Could you read it again?